Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about something so important, and that is the planetary cycles that we use in Vedic astrology, which are the dashas. So I've been continuing on and talking about each and every Maha Dasha that we might be going through and how it will result depending on how the planets are placed in your chart. So before I begin, I always want to remind everyone that if you would like to receive my free newsletter, go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, which is galacticcenter.org. And while you're there, always remember, check out my spiritual jewelry that I have remembrances of who we are on our spiritual path. And if you would like to study and learn Vedic astrology, go to my university website, which is universityofvedicastrology.com. So with that, today I want to talk about the Sun's Dasha. What about if you're in the Sun's Dasha? Now let me remind everyone how these dashas are calculated. And what I am always referring to is the dasha sequence or system that most Vedic astrologers use the most, and it's called the Vimshotri Dasha system. And with that, it is based on where your natal moon is in your chart. According to what nakshatra your moon is in, the planet that rules that nakshatra starts out your entire planetary cycles. So let's say you start out in the sun cycle, then that means that you'd have to be in a Mahadasha such as Kritika. Kritika is ruled by the sun. That would start your whole planetary cycle. But relatively, we want to know, what if you're about to go into the sun's Mahadasha? It is a 6-year cycle. It is the shortest one of all. But you could say, well, you're going to come into a sense of knowingness, power, self-understanding, because that's what the sun is. The sun is the Atma in the chart. It's your spirit. It's your spirit and soul. It's your essence of your physical being on this planet. That's what the sun rules. But the sun's Mahadasha will not be the same for everyone, because this dasha means however the sun is placed in a chart reveals what your experiences are. So in other words, the sun's dasha is going to be different for everyone. And that is totally based on where the sun is, what house it sits in. Now, there's so many other variables. It's not only the house that the sun is in, but it's planets that may be conjunct the sun. It can even be planets that aspect or oppose the sun. They will come into play as well. And don't forget, the sub-cycle called the Bhukti is very important. So we have the grand cycle ruler, the Maha Dasha. Maha means grand. And we have the second level down, it's the sub-cycle. And many call it the Antara Dasha, but I was always trained, it is the Bhukti. So I use the grand cycle and the sub-cycle. But just to get a sense and a feel what the sun's Mahadasha will be like, will be how the sun is placed by house. That's the first variable. And the second variable are what houses does the sun rule in your chart. These two variables, what house it's in, what house it rules, will be what is of utmost importance through this whole 6-year cycle. So let's dig in here. Let's say you go into the sun's dasha, and you have the sun in the first house. Well, you're a pretty powerful person to begin with the sun in the first house. You're very well aware of who you are, your purpose, your soul, your essence, and pretty confident with the sun being in the first house. When you go into this dasha, especially in the very first phase, sun, you're going to be very much consumed with self-development. You may even change the way you look. You may change the way you dress. You may change the clothes, buying new clothing, because the first house is really you. And another thing that astrologers don't realize, many times the first house can deal with your environment, how you perceive your world. And sometimes when people go into cycles in planets in the first house, they do have a change of residence. So all these things come up, but it's also mainly about your perception, about who you are, what you are, and the changes that you're going to ensue about what your whole ego or identity is. So let's talk about if you have the sun in the second house and you enter into the Sun's Maha Dasha. This will be about money, and many times it can be about spending, depending on all the other placements, but sometimes the sun burns a hole through things. Remember, when we can't look at the sun, it's too bright. And with it being in the second house, it can burn out some of the finances. So you got to be careful about spending when you go into the Sun's Maha Dasha with the sun in the second house. It can also bring up issues from childhood, dealing with your father. Sun is the father, don't forget. Let's say you go into the Sun's Maha Dasha and the sun is in the third house. Well, this is going to be a time period where you're going to think, I need to go back to school. I need to learn some new things. This will put me ahead. So education and learning become vitally important. And if you have a sibling, and many times with the sun, not always, but many times with the sun being in the third house, you have a brother. But this may be in reference to a very strong personality type sister. So the sun in the third house, you're going to have more connections and things to work out with a sibling. Remember, the sun is pretty fiery and it could cause some issues around relationships with siblings. And with the sun being in the third house and you go into the Sun's Dasha, you'll be traveling more, short distances, maybe even a commute. You're in the car all the time. That's what that would mean. Let's say you go into the Sun's Maha Dasha and it's in the fourth house. Chances are you will have a change of residence, especially in the beginning phase of the Sun's Dasha. And if it's there, you may have to work out some issues with a domineering mother. Things about the past with the mother will come up, and sorting these things out. But most of all, usually there's a change of residence. So let's say you go into the Sun's Maha Dasha and the sun's in the fifth house. Well, the fifth house deals specifically with children, of course, so you may have to be dealing with some issues or things that come up with your kids. Depending on other planets, it could be something where there's some honors for your children or something really positive, but at the same time, the sun is too much energy and that child requires a lot of attention. Furthermore, you may not have children. Sun in the fifth house could mean that. But many times when people have the sun in the fifth house, they have male children too. They have boys. But it can also deal with your investments. The fifth house is investments, or that it's a time that you're called upon to give some advice to other people. You might be investing in the stock market at this time. Be careful. The sun can be intense. Could be a time of learning astrology, learning new subjects, taking on a new business, being an entrepreneur, being more creative, maybe writing that book that you've been putting off. All right, so let's say you have a sun in the sixth house and you go in the Sun's Maha Dasha. So it's a time to start getting more intense about health and healing. This is something that you have to look after, your health. And usually when a sun is all by itself in the 6th house, you're extremely healthy anyway. But you will begin working a lot more. Work is important. Lots and lots of work comes about, new opportunities. But you're going to have to be dealing with employees or coworkers. Lots going on in that arena. Maybe it's time to hire some new employees. So what if you have the sun in the 7th house and you just started the Sun's Maha Dasha? You could meet someone. This is a time of serious relationships, or depending on its placement, you could have some issues that you have to be focused in on about relationships if you're married. But chances are this could be a time of serious relationships with a domineering partner, I might add, also, if you have the sun in the 6th house. I mean, in the 7th house, excuse me. So there's a focus around relationships at this time and throughout the 6 years. So let's say you go into the Sun's Maha Dasha and the sun's in the 8th house. This could be a time of deep study, research, analysis, getting to the bottom of some things from the past that you needed to work on and heal. It could be a time of psychoanalysis. This is deep stuff. It could be a time that your psychic awareness comes alive. You start seeing and knowing things. Also with the sun in the 8th house, be concerned about your reputation. The 8th house does deal with scandals. Let's say you go in the Sun's Maha Dasha and your sun's in the 9th house. It's a time of new learning and probably long distance travels taking you many places. Maybe it's time to go back to school, get a doctorate, a master's. One way or another, you're learning all sorts of new information, and especially about truth and spirituality. This is a passion and a love with the sun in the 9th house, but you may be having some issues with your father. Sun in the 9th house, you have a domineering, overbearing dad. They can be successful, but they are something else. Okay, if you have the sun in the 10th house, and you just go into the Sun's Maha Dasha, your job will probably change. You should be looking into working by yourself. In other words, have your own business, be independent, or you could have a promotion or a raise, or something changes in the workplace that brings you to the top, because the sun in the 10th house is very auspicious for business, work, and career. Yes, it's great. So I always tell people with the sun in the 10th house, you should own your own business. You don't take orders from other people very well. So think about, maybe it's time for you to begin your new business. If you've been thinking about it and you're not there yet, in your Sun's Maha Dasha, you will do it. But probably you already have your own business, or maybe working for someone else. You actually do pretty much work for yourself. You don't have to take orders because you're the boss. But you should be the ultimate boss with the sun in the 10th house. So let's say you have the sun in the 11th. We go into the Sun's Maha Dasha. This is the time you're going to be meeting some influential, important people. The sun is power. The sun is how you make your money from your work, and you will be very productive. This is the house of great gains. So the sun being there means it's a time for you to start being more productive, making more money through your work, through your career. And if you have an older sibling, this is the time you're going to have to deal with them, because this is power and intense, and they are overbearing, but chances are you're probably the oldest one in your family. So if you have a sun in the 12th, you go into the Sun's Maha Dasha, this is a huge turning point in your life where you're letting go of things from the past. And there can be some losses. Maybe the losses are that which you have to let go of. And the Sun in the 12th, you spend more time alone, doing research, analysis, study. But it's a time of healing. And it's time for you to look into your own healing, especially if there's any emotional issues that are affecting your physical constitution or your health. Look into this. So this covers all the planets, all the placements the Sun could be. Remember, there's a lot more to this, but this is a start. And don't forget, we didn't even cover what houses the Sun rules. So if you go to your chart and you look at what house is ruled by Leo, that's going to come into play as well. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information on me, always remember you can go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. And if you would like to learn Vedic astrology, check out my university website, which is universityofvedicastrology.com. And I want to add that one of my premier students, yes, Gautam Gupta, he is a graduate of the university, brilliant, brilliant mind. He's an astrologer. He's the one that gave me the idea to do these videos on the Mahadashas. So thank you, Gautam, and thank you everyone else.